Welcome to your weekly dose of NFL Jibber Jabber, the Club Dub Football Podcast. Remember to follow on Twitter, Insta, and watch video shows each week on YouTube. Want to get in touch? That's easy. Message through social or email clubdubpodcast@mail.com.
Welcome to the
Club Dub Football Podcast,
where the only question is,
does your team make it into the club?
Can he get in? No, he cannot!
Hi, gents.
Hey, Rob.
Hi, Ron.
Thanks for that, baby. Right, so I love the fact I start so full of energy. It's time for us to say hi after our kind of unplanned hiatus. Recorded the week before last on Tuesday, now on a Friday. A big gap for our many fans out there in listener land to wait, but the wait will be worth it as we have a packed catalogue of shows coming your way over the next few weeks. Next week, it will be our lead up to the draft, our draft build-up show that many of you remember from last year, where we rely on our college football expert, James Aldrin, to take us through all the hits and the misses of the draft in 2022. But just before we get there, we were going to kind of do the highlights of the draft leading in, maybe split our draft show into two, and other news has kind of come to the forefront, grabbed our attention and changed the topic of our would-be pod. So today we're going to talk about the players recently who have requested trades and those who are potentially refusing to turn up to organised team activity, all because they believe the market has been reset without them and they're all after a little bit of money. If player power existed from the days of, John Elway, how much power do franchises really have nowadays when these superstars decide they want a change of scenery or a boost to their bank balance? So we've got quarterbacks to talk about shortly in terms of Murray and probably Mayfield as well, swinging around to trade requests. But before we get to quarterback, shall we start with wide receivers? I was talking about a reset marketplace, and all of a sudden Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill seem to have made themselves multimillionaires, and it seems like a few others are quite happy to cash in. Debo Samuel, Terry McLaurin, maybe the next couple. But Aldrin, let's hand over to you. What do you think about the latest craze for players getting more money? Is this just another example of player power or something the NFL collectively, or the owners of the franchises in the NFL collectively, need to tackle?
It's funny, isn't it? I think I said before we started that it does feel a little bit unprecedented, the amount of players this off-season, and particularly the last few months, that have started to be more vocal. The trend seems to be removing the team name from your Instagram and Twitter bios and removing all pictures in team colors and all that kind of stuff. And then it inevitably kind of bleeds into agents leaking that they're not maybe going to attend off-season workouts, that they're seeking new contracts and yada, yada, yada. But it does really seem to be much more an era of player power. And particularly, you used to get it as players entered the last year of their contracts that they would, push for new deals, and maybe we'd look at sitting out the non-mandatory elements of pre-season. But now it seems that players, 2 years, like you said, 2 years away from the end of their contracts, their rookie deals are now in a position where they feel it's appropriate to demand and, like you said, hold to ransom their organizations that are building around them. I think Deebo Samuel's the one most recently in the last couple of days that's made it very clear that he's seeking a trade. I think this one's a weird one. It doesn't seem to necessarily be money related. He seems to have suggested that he's unhappy with the way in which he was used last year of the 49ers. And I think they've been aware of that all off season. I think it certainly seems to have been known in the organization that he was disgruntled. But ultimately, I think, the lofty numbers that he did put up last year were only in part because he was playing that hybrid role. And And I can't imagine that he would get traded to an organisation and they wouldn't want to capitalise on what he's shown. You know, any organisation is going to, if you were to trade for him, is trading for him knowing that he's a dual threat player. You're not just picking him as a wide receiver. But yeah, it just seems odd. The amount of money that's been going around to the wide receiver position this off-season, most notably with Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams, has reset things. But I do think it's a bit off that, you know, some of these younger players that have, you know, had 1 or 2 good years seem to think that it's now within their remit to be demanding trades or big money.
So there's 2 aspects, isn't there, to the Deebo Samuel thing. Firstly, there's this new, I suppose, level been set for kind of upper end, and we're talking kind of the elite guys, aren't we, wide receivers, which is this 20 million a year figure now that they all seem to be striking for. But it is interesting, as you said, that Deebo's, it was his brother, wasn't it, that posted on social media that the reason wasn't just that he wanted to move away from the 49ers for more money. It was what they called the heavy toll, you know, and the fact that somehow all of this work he's been doing, you know, as running back, receiver and everything in between is going to limit his career. So who out there is going to trade and pay $20 million a year for a guy who seems to be saying he wants a lesser workload and a lesser role? It just doesn't all seem to add up unless some of what we're hearing isn't quite right. PB, I mean, nobody has been more active in the market over the last few years than the Buccaneers, right? You have pulled in free agents from here, there and everywhere. But do you think that what receivers are doing now really only makes them a target to those poor teams with loads of cap space? And I am probably thinking of Tyreek Hill ending up a Dolphin. Is this a trend that's going to continue with Deebo, with AJ Brown and others?
Yeah, I think so, because predominantly the teams towards the basement don't have the better players, so they're not paying massive salaries, so they've got lots of cap space, so they can then overpay at positions. You know, you only have to look at the Jaguars paying Christian Kirk as much as they did to see, you know, how much they have to spend or to waste, whatever you know, however you want to put it. I think it goes back, you know, I'll mention Brady early this week. It goes back, if you look at Tom Brady historically, not just at the Buccaneers, but when he was at the Patriots as well, he took less than market value, you know, for his skill set at his position so that they could build a better team around him. You know, and that's led him to be, you know, inconsistently winning teams year after year after year after year. And then you look at guys like Aaron Rodgers taking so much money, Patrick Mahomes taking so much money. You know, if Mahomes hadn't taken as much as he did, then the Chiefs arguably would have been able to keep Tyreek Hill there. So, you know, I think wanting to be the highest paid player at the position, I think, you know, it benefits you personally in the sense that you're making a massive wedge of cash. But in terms of your Super Bowl aspirations, I think, you know, you're kind of almost saying I'd rather take the money than have the opportunity at a Super Bowl and being on a competitive team. I think, I mean, Aldrin said with Deebo Samuel, it's not about the money. I think it's always about the money, isn't it? Like, even now, you know, the talk is that it looks like he's going to be traded and they've taken calls and all this kind of stuff. I would not be surprised to see Deebo Samuel re-sign a new deal on the Niners, you know, for a boatload of money. And it's odd if you have a skill set that makes you, you know, one of the best players in the league, arguably, because you can play, you know, almost play 2 positions and you're always going to throw up something different and it makes your team competitive. I don't know why you would then want to move away from that and say, oh, actually, no, I only want to play this, you know, I only want to play this position. And you know, it kind of, I think that actually hampers his value. You know, if he was to go somewhere and say, actually, I'm happy receiving, I'm happy being a running back, you know, pay me the money to cover, you know, 1.5 or 2 positions, surely that ups his market value, right? So, you know, it's a strange one for me. I still think he'll stay at the Niners and it's all just, you know, tactics to you know, increase that value. But what I would say, when Aldrin mentioned the fact that they delete all their pictures and the mentions of the team and all that kind of stuff off Instagram or whatever, it's a little bit schoolgirl, isn't it? At the end of the day, like, it's, you know, it's a bit, I think you grow out of that in high school where you're deleting all that stuff. Everybody knows you're still a player on that team. I don't think deleting all the stuff off social media has any effect apart from just create this kind of media whirlwind around you.
To Phil's point, when Debo says, it's taking a toll and it's going to limit my career, well, ultimately what he's meaning is it's going to limit my career earning potential. So yeah, I'm kind of with Phil. If you pay him the cash or cover an extra year that he might not play, then I think he'd be quite happy.
I mean, I'm going to throw over to JB now. And the weird thing is, JB, I don't know if you want to pick up on this or go your own way with it, but when you hear those kind of comments about, the toll of workload, it kind of reminds me of Le'Veon Bell when he left the Steelers and he had that year off and then basically said, oh, well, I'm a year older, but it's a year away from football. It's no more, it's no more wear on the tires and all these kind of analogies. When ultimately that year away from football meant he never really return to anything like his best after that. I mean, if these guys really do push and really don't end up playing for some of the season, is there not a danger that they kind of go the way of Bell or actually a number of other superstar players, Brown and others who just never quite find their way back to the heady heights of that elite level?
You're right. There are far too many gambles. There are far too many potential negatives when you think about the situation, because ultimately if you're a player putting this kind of do or die scenario on your career with the club that's drafted you, the franchise that's drafted you, it's got just as much chance of backfiring completely. Not just for those like Le'Veon Bell's the prime example of a guy who sat out because he didn't think the Steelers valued him as he should have been valued, who since then did absolutely nothing. Now, we've seen times when it has worked out. We obviously, like Eli Manning was a New York Giant. No, it wasn't. Eli Manning was a San Diego Charger for a couple of minutes before he was a New York Giant. John Elway, sorry, Aldrin, was famously a Baltimore Colt for a little bit of time. So it does pay off sometimes, but then you're forcing your franchise to say, right, pay me or draft me to another team. Okay, we'll do that. Phil made kind of a sort of a valid point in talking about the clubs that can afford those big money contracts are the ones that aren't very good. And that's why they've got a lot of money. And with apologies for picking on them, but the Jacksonville Jaguars being the example. Anytime there's any situation like this, the Jags are generally always the first or one of the first teams that come up in it because they have the money to be able to pay for this kind of stuff. And if we're talking about Debo as the example, but obviously we've named others, we talk about Kyler Murray. There are teams that would absolutely be upgrading their quarterback by picking up Kyler Murray and holding my hand up and saying my Pittsburgh Steelers are absolutely one of those. Does Kyler Murray want to go and play for one of those teams? Might want to come and play for the Steelers. They are relatively successful, but if you're Kyler Murray, do you want to go from Glendale, Arizona? Yeah, Rob is nodding. To, I'm going to pick on New York. Yeah, are you going to go play at a MetLife Stadium? Do you want to go and play in Minneapolis? You'd be an upgrade on Kirk Cousins. And for all of the noted Club Dub fans, including hello superfan Nick, that is a tick in your bingo for JB slagging off the Giants. There's far too much out there. And as we have also said, if you're picking a player, if you're trading for a player, you're trading for that version of that player. This isn't Debo's first year in the league, but it was the first year that was left thinking what an absolute asset that guy was to the San Francisco 49ers. So if a team is looking at that and thinking, yeah, we're gonna pay good money for that guy and we're going to turn him into not what he was, everyone involved in that needs to go into the league's mandatory drug testing policy because they're all on something. It's the equivalent of the Bucks signing Tom Brady in free agency and trying to run him like a Lamar Jackson, Cam Newton, Kyler Murray rushing quarterback. It is baffling.
So So you make a good point there about Deebo Samuel, right? Which we've only just landed on. That actually this guy comes off one really good season. Not his first season in the league, but nevertheless one really, really good season. And it was stellar. So is there an argument to say that his case then is different to some of the other receivers who are holding out for more money? So, you know, Brown. So with the Tennessee Titans, you've got AJ Brown, who has produced there for a number of years and is now wanting his salary to reflect his status, his stature in the league. Now, he's not talking about, you know, wanting to be traded. He's not making those kind of requests. What he is saying, though, is I want to be paid in line with receivers who have similar production to me. Otherwise, I'm not going to be attending not only OTAs, but into training camp and potentially beyond. And I suppose I'm back around with you, Aldrin, is Brown's situation different? Have we seen enough to suggest he maybe earns that new deal, or is he just another opportunist in the market?
I mean, I think, in truth, I think a lot of them, yeah, and not just thinking Brown, but a lot of the guys that have, you know, wanted money this year have shown that they've earned a pay rise. Certainly, I think some of them have gone a bit stratospheric in terms of how much money they've been offered and how much money they've taken. You know, Christian Kirk is probably the one that stands out to me. But like you've said before, cap space doesn't win you games. You might as well spend it. And if you've got players that you can pick up, then great. But ultimately, the teams that can afford that kind of salary are those bottom basement teams, like you've said. So I guess it's interesting. Brown hasn't been as vocal as maybe a Deebo or a Devontae Adams have been in terms of wanting to get the big bucks and are prepared to go anywhere in order to achieve that. You know, I think Brown's probably gone about it in the right way, shown his worth to the team, shown his value in the league, and kind of quietly, not quietly, I mean, we've heard about it, so it's not that quiet, but, you know, gone about his business within the organization and made clear what he's after. So I think players like that, I can get on board with a little bit more, that have, you know, shown that they can do it for that organization over a fairly more consistent period of time. Deebo is one that I'm a little perturbed about, I guess. Not perturbed, but, you know what I mean? It just doesn't quite sit right. He's had one good year. First season, he missed a bunch of games through injury and never really got any consistent production. So I think it's a bit presumptuous that you have one good year in which Kyle Shanahan makes you the star guy, and all of a sudden you don't like the way in which you're made the star guy. You know, ultimately you could quite happily go get traded to a New York Jets and be wide receiver 2 in a mediocre organization. You know, I think you take what you get. You're working in an offense with Kyle Shanahan. He is going to be creative and he's going to get you involved. And sometimes that means you playing out the backfield. But yeah, I don't know. The Tyreek Hills and the Devontae Adams of the world, I kind of get. You know, those guys have been in the league, proved it, done it, and deserve their payday. And, you know, ultimately, I think after you've been in the league 5 or 6 years, you go to Miami and you maybe don't have the same shot you have at winning a Super Bowl, but you get your payday. Whereas it's the younger ones. And this is why the Kyler Murray thing really rankles me, I guess, because you've not really proved anything yet. Yeah, you've had some good games, but like you said, he's not won a playoff game. He's not dragging teams to Super Bowls. And ultimately, the reason that a team like Arizona at the minute, and it's the same with others, you know, a team is going to compete because they've got a good young quarterback on a rookie deal whereby they can pay other players to be crucial pieces, because ultimately Kyler can't do it all himself. So that situation just feels odd to me. He seems, like Phil said, the antithesis of what Tom Brady's about, just wants all of the money up front. I mean, 2-3 years into his deal, he suddenly thinks he's the best player in the league when I don't have him even top 5 or 6 as quarterbacks. I like some of the stuff that he does, but until he proves it and starts dominating games, then I'm yet to believe that he deserves his payday.
So we've now got another topic burning here about the players who are wanting money before they've earned it. I mean, sticking with Deebo just as our kind of, I don't know, I suppose our case in point, his timing seems odd. Firstly, because we obviously know that the 49ers are going to be moving on from Garoppolo, with Trey Lance being the presumptive starter. They've obviously got that huge amount of cap space at the moment tied up in Garoppolo's money. Do you think Deebo's pushing because it's another deep draft class of wide receivers? What do you think, PB?
Waiting for you to stop talking so I can interject. For me...
I do apologise, Phil. Do we not give you enough airtime? Does Phil... Do we need to talk contracts internally? Is it Phil doesn't like the way he's utilised Aldrin? This is the problem we've got.
Very presumptive for the 1 year performance.
This has brought things to light, and I am willing to do the podcast for the original agreed fee.
I have noticed he's taken the Club Dub logo off his Instagram feed as well.
Has he?
It's not boding well, is it?
Oh, no.
It's because I've got a point I'm eager to make. So, Debo Samuel, I think, is coming off arguably the best season of his career. His value is probably never going to be higher. If he gets an injury in week 1 and is out for the season next year, his value has already plummeted going into his final year of his rookie deal. And I think that's why he's trying to capitalise on it, and also why I think they'll do a deal. AJ Brown, similar in that he's the number 1 receiver for the Titans. He's the massive part of their offense. He stepped up a bit when Derrick Henry went down. They're a run first team, but they need to have that dual threat as well. I think he's coming into the last year of his deal, is he? Or has he still got 2 years left? I'm not sure. But I think they'll get a deal done there. I don't think he's going to ask for superstar money, and they'll get a deal done. Kyler Murray is the one that I kind of wanted to make a point on, because I think he's doing it, and you're not going to want to hear this, Rob. I think he's doing it because the Cardinals aren't going to, I don't think he thinks they're going to make the playoffs this year. I think if you look at their division, you think the Rams will make the playoffs again because they've pretty much kept the roster together apart from a few things. I think you look at that and think that the Niners are going to make the playoffs again because if they're healthy, they're arguably one of the best teams in that division.
Young unknown quarterback though.
Well, they may not. They may have. It wouldn't surprise me for them to have Garoppolo starting week 1. I don't know. The longer it goes, who knows? But I think if they were sold in on Trey Lance, they'd have tried to move Garoppolo early before all these other moves had happened. But that's 2 teams in that division, and then it's not every year where you have the situation like last year where 3 teams from that division are going to go to the playoffs. I don't know the strength of their schedule, but I kind of feel like if the Cardinals don't make the playoffs this year, he's then going into the last year of his rookie deal. As you've said, he's not won a playoff game. Does it make his bargaining point weaker than if he does it now after a playoff season, where he has played pretty well? There's the Hail Mary play from the season before is still fresh in the memory. He had a decent season this year. Again, I think it's trying to capitalise on the market at the right time, but I don't think you can pay him, Mahomes money or Aaron Rodgers money or something like that. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. I think they're a step above what Kyler Murray would get. But it's going to be interesting to see. I can't see him not playing. I think that's a crazy decision in year 3. But I suppose, anything can happen in the NFL.
I think we've danced around a major point in everything that we're talking about, and it's the very simple 5 years, $230 million, fully guaranteed. That's the money that the Cleveland Browns have questionably, depending on who you're asking, paid their new starting quarterback. That's not like flash money. That has to be seen by everyone as resetting the value of everyone money, because there's always been a gulf between the money that you pay a quarterback and the money that you pay every other person on your team. And admittedly, for better or for worse, and a lot of people won't like this, that's because it is easier generally to go and replace every other person on your team apart from your quarterback. And the reason that we know this is because how bad multiple teams, I'm not going to pick on individuals again this time, have been for decades now.
Sorry, JB, I just had a thought. When you mentioned Cleveland Browns and Deshaun Watson. Do you think that situation makes Kyler Murray think, well, do you know what? Watson sat a year and not seen and gone through all of the turmoil and stuff. I'm not going to go into it, but he's gone through all of that and it's not affected his market value in any way, shape or form. And in fact, he's got probably a bigger deal than he was going to get prior. So do you think Kyler Murray looks at it and goes, well, I've not got all of that drama. I'm still playing at the top of my game. If I do sit a year, actually, it doesn't affect my value in terms of getting that big long-term deal that I want.
Yeah, so you're kind of picking on a lot of, kind of going back to what Rob asked me about Lev Bell. We're talking about Deshaun Watson earning all of that money after a year off. What Deshaun Watson are we going to get when we get back? And the people kind of not wanting to take wide shots at a certain group of NFL talking heads, but the people that are talking about how, the time off won't have affected Deshaun Watson are the same people that were immediately on Colin Kaepernick saying, he's washed because he's missed a season. It appears to be selective memory depending on who it is. We're not getting into that though. You have to look at the money that they are willing to pay for Deshaun Watson as any type of player and think, well, hang on a minute, I deserve that. I am as key to what our team does as Deshaun Watson is going to be to the Browns. And not just talking about guys like Deebo. Let's talk about Cordell Patterson for a little bit, because that was a guy who had a revelatory. I think that
very good.
Good.
Very good. He had a very good season last year in exactly the same kind of mold as Deebo did. It was everything they needed him to do. It was a returner. It was a running back. It was a wide receiver. And that came out of nowhere. With Matt Ryan now not in Atlanta anymore, is there a player that you would look at on that Falcons team after last season more than Cordell Patterson as the reason they're going to win? So shouldn't he earn more money? But then, well, can he do it again? That's the question. And it goes back to what we were talking about with Deebo. Not just can he do it again for a different team? Can he do it again for the same team? Can they do all of this again next year? There are far too many questions about everything like this for us to be able to say the money's worth it or we should have more of it. Rob's sort of initial introduction to all of this was talking about, is this a problem for the NFL? Is this something that the owners need to address? No, everyone should be paid more. I think that's kind of it. I think you talk about people being people on, they've taken team-friendly contracts. You deride players who don't re-sign for your team because they can get more money going somewhere else. Good for them. Go and get paid as much as you can, because to circle to a little bit of what Phil talked about, they could get injured and their career could end the first week of the season. And at which point, what have they got then? So,
I don't think that is the point though, because let's we've kind of come around to Kyler Murray. So let's stick with Kyler Murray now rather than Deebo, right? So as a Cardinals fan, I've just watched Chandler Jones get to the end of his deal and go to Vegas, to the Raiders on an absolute fortune, right? A deal that the Cardinals were never really willing to match. And as a fan, I have no issue with that. Played brilliantly, absolutely deserves big money. Christian Kirk could be in the same mold. Kyler Murray and Deebo Samuel are not in the same bracket because they are under contract. They have signed a contract to say they are going to play for these teams for this many seasons. And now in the middle of that, they're suddenly holding their teams to ransom, not saying I want a new deal, saying without a new deal, I will not play. And that I think is different. And look, there's two arguments really to the one you make, JB, about longevity of an NFL career. An NFL career can be ended in an instant. We've all seen those one-play freak injuries that have taken players not only away from their teams but out of football, and that risk exists. These are players who put their bodies on the line, and I don't doubt they should be handsomely paid for it. But ultimately, this is surely a part of this is players going back on agreements, isn't it? I mean, Kyler Murray is theoretically 2 years away from the end of his deal. Deebo Samuel, at least a year away. We're talking about players now who are saying, you know what, I signed at this point, but now I think I want more. And now when you factor in Deshaun Watson, the Deshaun Watson thing is, it has the ability at least to be seismic, because if he does come back at anything like his best, then it really does change the way that people might look at trades for quarterbacks. You said earlier, getting a quarterback is so important. You can always get other players. Of course you can. We've seen 3 of the best wide receivers in the league traded this offseason. You don't see that many quarterbacks traded. And Deshaun Watson was ultimately a guy in his prime in the top 5 who was available for trade. And ultimately, to beat the Falcons, I think the Browns had to go big or go home, and they went huge. Whether that'll work out for them, who quite knows. But I think Kyler Murray, the other thing I find really bizarre about the whole Kyler Murray thing is it's been presented by his agent as being a team-friendly deal, but only because if they take the numbers, the Cardinals take on the numbers his agent suggested, Kyler's salary hit would be less next season before climbing rapidly the season after that and the season after that. The idea being that they could do more things next season, bring in more free agents, make themselves more competitive and so on. But actually that's then 2 players, not only Murray, but actually D-Hop as well, who would have these massively climbing deals that would leave the franchise hamstrung in a couple of seasons, with very little cap space. And what happens then when Kyler Murray wants a trade? What happens then when DeAndre Hopkins wants to walk away? I appreciate there's a flip side that players are cut all the time, but at least there is guaranteed money built into these deals that if a team changes its mind, well, there is a degree of compensation a player should receive. It feels like these players are wanting to walk away with nothing, take no responsibility and just get a big payday. And I think as a Cardinals fan, that's what really riles a fan base, really gets under their skin when it feels like, we picked this guy number 1. He sat in a room with Keim and Kingsbury and said how much he wanted to be a Cardinal, how much he wanted to go number 1. I just wonder if, Steve Keim and maybe even Cliff Kingsbury doesn't think back to those conversations and think, isn't hindsight a funny thing?
I don't think you're spot on, though. I think it's bang on. It's a funny situation. Murray's certainly the first one that I can remember so early in his contract. If we take it as read that the 5th-year option gets picked up on a top elite player who was drafted number 1, like everybody always gets their 5th-year deal option picked up. I can't remember anyone doing it quite so early, having not been quite so successful. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you were Mahomes and you come in after years 2 and 3, then you go, I want my money. The Chiefs go, yeah, okay, fair enough. You've earned it. You've played exceptionally well. With Murray, you don't quite have that same backing. And I don't know, it seems a very odd play from the agent, although ultimately I feel like they all do that sort of thing just to get their clients paid. And ultimately he's going to get Kyler Murray paid. It's just whether or not it's this year and whether it's the Arizona Cardinals, but ultimately that guy will get paid. But yeah, I mean, to Phil's earlier point, does he think the Arizona Cardinals won't make the playoffs? In truth, I don't know that. I've not seen anything that suggests that he really cares. It seems that he's just bothered about the cash. If you were bothered about making the playoffs, you make your situation as team friendly as possible, like Phil said, like Tom Brady does or has done over the course of his career. To go into 3 out of 5 years of your contract and say, give me as much money as the very, very best players in the league that have taken their teams to championship games. There's a heck of a lot of quarterbacks that are on less money than he is that have done a heck of a lot more. So, yeah, I don't know. I find it a very odd situation, but like I said, it feels like unprecedented times at the minute with players demanding money and demanding new deals when they've not really shown that they've earned it.
One here for you, Rob, as a Cardinals fan, and I haven't looked at whether the picks are available and stuff like that. Would you take straight up, given the situation, if he refuses to play and all that stuff, would you take Baker Mayfield and 2 firsts for Kyler Murray, or would you take Jimmy Garoppolo and 2 firsts for Kyler Murray?
No, I don't think I would. I think I would pay Kyler the money, but there for me is the problem, that I'm not the only person that thinks that, because clearly Kyler Murray and his agent think that as well. It's this angle, isn't it? I mean, I think Baker Mayfield, let's go back a step to Aldrin's point, and then I'll answer your question more fully, Phil. The quarterbacks that got extensions year 3, I mean, Mahomes really was the one who kind of set this precedent. And look what he'd already done. I mean, he was a redshirt in his first year, playing behind Alex Smith, and then absolutely exploded to be one of the league's best. I don't think Murray's done that. There is an argument. I mean, Wentz is another one who was extended maybe too early. But I mean, the Eagles had got to and won their first ever franchise Super Bowl. All the indicators were there that he was doing great things and was taking him on an upward trajectory. I mean, Kyler Murray has looked really, really ordinary in 2 playoff games. Now, I love Kyler Murray being the quarterback of the Cardinals. I've been a Cardinals fan for 30 years. He's probably the best quarterback we've had, probably along with Warner, but we had him very much at the tail end of his career. And probably you could argue the same with a couple of others. I mean, I don't know, Carson Palmer, maybe again, another great quarterback, but did we have him a few years too late? So I think Kyler offers us a really exciting 10 years of high level quarterback play and gives us a chance to be competitive. But I just think, it's more than that. I think it's holding the franchise who picked you to ransom. I don't know. I just don't like the way it plays out. So no, I would keep Kyler Murray over probably all but 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the NFL. I really do rate him that highly. But I think at the end of next year, I'd have no argument with this. It feels like the timing here is opportunist, and I'm not sure I'm entirely on board with that.
The Mahomes thing was interesting. Sorry, JB, I was just going to
say, can we just take a moment to appreciate Phil's premise there was, Rob, if the Cardinals aren't re-signing Kyler Murray, would you rather have Baker Mayfield or Jimmy Garoppolo? And Rob's response was, I would retain Kyler Murray, and just completely disregarded what Phil was trying to do.
I like that.
Oh, if I'm picking between the two, Jimmy Garoppolo.
Jimmy.
Yeah, I'd pick Jimmy still.
At least he's made it to a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing, you mentioned the ones that got deals early, the Wentz thing and Mahomes, you take both of those. Both were mutual decisions. The franchises looked at the situation and thought, heck, I'm better paying these guys now than in 2 years' time when I have to pay an extra 10 or 15 million a year for these types of top level players. You don't get the impression that the Arizona Cardinals are thinking, oh, gee, we best pay him now because in 2 years' time his value is going to have skyrocketed. This is entirely driven by Murray and his agent, and it's a very one-way street. And that's, it goes back to your point, holding them over a barrel, really, because there doesn't seem to be any interest from the Arizona Cardinals to engage in a contract talk right now. And that's why Kyler's been pushing it so hard.
So there is another one, just to add a little bit of subtext to this. Derek Carr obviously signed his new deal, his extension in the last, 7 to 10 days since we spoke last. And he, with that new deal, is now the 6th best paid quarterback in the NFL, averaging 40 million, a little more a year in guaranteed money, 121 million guaranteed over 3 years. And the interesting thing, if you listen to his interview, is he said he signed what he believed was a team-friendly deal because after he signed his last contract with the Raiders, he was upset to watch a lot of that top-tier talent have to be traded away. And he felt that signing this deal was important because it gives the team stability to be able to build around him. If I'm going to be honest, Kyler Murray on his rookie deal is on $9 million a year. Well, I'd rather take Kyler Murray on $9 million than probably 3 Derek Carr. I do think there is a bit of disparity here, but I think Kyler asking what he's asking seems a bit bizarre. And is it just me that thinks Derek Carr's team-friendly deal of $40 million is probably the least team-friendly deal I've ever heard in my life?
So generous, isn't it? It's like Elon Musk and Bill Gates. They're so generous with their money.
I mean,
230 million fully guaranteed.
Who, what, where, what?
Sorry, you're talking about team like his so-and-so's deal? Is it the least team-friendly deal? We have talked on
Deshaun
many
Watson.
occasions about, yes, a guy who is getting paid $230 million over 5 years, no matter what happens.
He's taken a team-friendly, very, very team-friendly first-year deal, though, hasn't he, at $1 million base salary? Not sure.
Yeah, why is that again?
So they can pay the big money to get receivers in like Adams, I suppose, and chunk up. It just, I don't get it. Cap space is
not Carr.
Oh, sorry, talking about. The Watson thing is. I wonder why that might be. But looking at the figures, Tom Brady on 25 mil. You know, absolutely what Phil said. It's what's put on the tin. You know, 25 million
as well.
Yeah, but he knows it. He knows that he's a robot. 25 million over 50 years is a lot of money at the end of the day, isn't it? So
$4.5 million less than Tannehill.
They've reportedly reworked his deal today to clear $9 million in cap space as well. So the moves aren't done.
Takes his contract into 2030. Be 95 by the time he sees out his deal.
Well, the joys of it. I mean, just to look at players who are on that kind of money. Jimmy Garoppolo's on more money. Ryan Tannehill's on more money. Carson Wentz is on more money. Jared Goff is on more money. Derek Carr obviously is on more money. I just don't know. Quarterbacks, every time a quarterback gets a new deal, it seems to reset the market. But Deshaun Watson's does seem troublesome, doesn't it, for other teams if quarterbacks look at that figure and think, well, if Deshaun Watson takes a year out of the game and he's worth that, what might I be worth? So let's do a quick round the room to wrap up our conversation on forcing trades. And Phil's already started this because he talked about where players land. So I'm going to go around the room, starting with you, Aldrin. Deebo Samuel, does he start next season a 49er on a new deal, a 49er not on a new deal, or somewhere else?
I was with Phil and I kind of suggested the other day as well. I think he ends up staying in the 49ers on a bigger money and maybe some sort of agreement that they scale back his running back duties, or there's hefty financial rewards if he gets 5 rushing touchdowns, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think he stays with the 49ers.
An incentivized Debo stays. PB? Deebo Samuel, does he stay a 49er?
Yeah, I think for me, I mentioned earlier, I think he stays. I think he's going to get a big money deal.
Big hole if he left, actually, wouldn't it? Big hole with the way Shanahan works. But anyway, JB?
I think Debo will end up being a Carolina Panther.
Do you know what? I thought I was going to be the only one. I'm with you, JB. I think at the moment they've got the Garoppolo money tied up. I know there's things that you can do and you can push money down the road. I do think he's got half a chance of ending up somewhere else. So we're split on Deebo Samuel. Let's keep this one quick, because I think we all kind of spoke about being in agreement. AJ Brown, does he stay a Titan on mega money or find his way somewhere else?
Stays put, but not on as much money as some of the wide receivers. But I think he stays put.
He definitely is top tier, isn't he, PB?
Yeah, he's going to get paid as a number one receiver because he is for the Titans.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. JB?
As much as he might want to get away and go and find better than average quarterback play, no, I think he stays at the Titans too.
I think he's in a good spot. So we're 4-4. And then we didn't really talk about this, but Terry Mclaren at the, I want to say it's the Commanders now, right? The Washington Commanders. Yeah. He wants big money, which is a little more bizarre to me. I mean, we talked about Deebo Samuel having one great season. I think McLaren's still got a little bit to prove for me. But Aldrin, does he go elsewhere on big money, or is he the Commanders WR1 come the new season?
Well, I think he gets a lot of money. They might as well pay him as a quarterback because they haven't got any over there, have they? So I'd give him the 26 million that they're paying Carson Wentz, because he's going to be a downside better than him.
PB?
Yeah, I think McLaren will probably get paid and stay there. It's been a good weapon for them. Had a bit of a quiet year last year. Did he have a couple of injuries? I can't really remember. But
who was their quarterback? Was it Tom Brady, their quarterback? No, was it a bin man throwing to them? Yes, it was. Taylor Heineke.
Taylor Heineke's not a bin man.
I think if he wasn't at the Commanders, he would be working on the street.
Okay, everyone's favourite backup. JB?
Yeah, if I'm the Commanders, I'm probably rushing out to pay Terry McLaurin all the money that they want. but admittedly that's less because I think he's worth it and more because when you have people Googling Washington football team and money, you don't want them finding what they're finding now.
Controversial. Can't move on quick enough. So we've done 3 receivers. Let's do 3 QBs. Terry McLaurin for me stays where he is. I don't think there's enough for market for him. I don't think he's quite got the leverage other players have got. Let's do QBs. Kyler Murray, Aldrin. Is he a Cardinal on mega money, sitting out a season, or somewhere else?
I think Kyler sits, is what I think.
Wow. PB?
They're not going to let him sit, so I think he gets paid. Whether he should or not is up for question, but I think he'll get
I don't know
paid.
whether he sits the whole year, but he definitely sits like early doors, I think.
JB?
Well, and I can't believe it's taken us this long to get this analogy. Much like another famous Arizona Cardinal, Kyler Murray is currently shouting, "Show me the money," and the Cardinals will.
Jerry Maguire references means that JB wins this week's podcast. And I'm going to say Kyler gets paid. I hope he gets paid. I think if he walks away, then I think we probably need a new general manager. I think it shows quite a lot of dysfunction if we end up letting a franchise QB walk away in this day and age. But horribly, I think we'll end up struggling with that kind of salary for a few years to come. So there was our first QB. Our second QB then, Baker Mayfield. He's obviously has to be traded. I can't imagine why. I think he's in an ideal situation playing alongside Deshaun Watson. So Aldrin, does Mayfield stay? Does he go? I mean, does anybody want him?
I think he'll go. I think the market will be low, but then, Seattle need a quarterback, so who cares? Go for a year.
Right. Mayfield a Seahawk. PB, what have you got for Baker Mayfield?
Yeah, I think Mayfield's... He wants to go to the Seahawks, doesn't he? Has he said that's a good landing place for him? I'm not 100% sure. But...
I think he said it because it's literally the only team that is in need of a quarterback that's not going to draft one.
Yeah. I mean, he'd probably be an upgrade on Wentz, personally speaking, but the Commanders aren't going to have traded for Wentz or signed Wentz or whatever and then get another quarterback. He'd probably be an upgrade on Darnold at the Panthers as well. You'd probably say, although, I take it with a pinch of salt, really. You don't know how Mariota's going to be. Mariota might come out and play really well, but you think he could be an upgrade there. So I think there's teams where Mayfield would be an upgrade, but the biggest hole in terms of their quarterback room is probably the Seahawks. So I guess they'll either draft or he could end up there eventually.
JB?
But I think he's too far gone with the whole spilling his beans on whatever podcast. Sorry, what turn of phrase?
What is that analogy? Oh, I've spilled my beans.
Wow.
Well, you spill the beans, don't you, when you say so? Anyway, kind of putting his opinions out there on a podcast is probably not the best way to go. And I think his bridges are probably burnt with the Browns. So yeah, I think he'll go. But then who knows, if Watson's suspended for the year, let's say, the Browns might want to keep him there. I mean, there's no incentive.
They got Brissett though, didn't they? They picked up Brissett with the whole intention.
I suppose, because if you're Mayfield and they say, "Oh, we want you to be our starting quarterback this year," I suppose they're trying to get him to earn himself a contract somewhere else. But what incentive? He could just throw pick sixes, every pass play, because he's not going to get a new deal there. So why not screw him over? But yeah, I think he'll play somewhere else.
JB?
I think Baker and his beans are going to the state of Washington and they're going to play for the Seahawks.
Wow. So everyone does. I mean, there are a few teams in the mix, aren't there? I mean, not a few teams in the mix probably, but a few teams who you feel could do with a quarterback. I mean, the Houston Texans need to stop being an afterthought. And also, I suppose there's always this thing where somebody, will end up going down with a horrible injury in training camp early in the season. So you wonder if the Browns and Mayfield are actually just quite happy to sit on this for a while to see who needs a quarterback most. You do wonder if it weren't for the moves that were made, whether Pittsburgh taking a Cleveland Browns quarterback. I mean, I know anything's possible in the modern day NFL, but who knows there. And right, our third time round, I'm going to stay. I'm going to say Baker starts the season at Brown, but ends up somewhere else pretty quickly when injuries take their toll. Let's do Garoppolo then. It's kind of the same, isn't it? Same options, same problems. Jimmy Garoppolo, does he start a 49er? Does he get released, or does he find himself traded elsewhere, Aldrin?
I think he gets traded after the draft into OTAs.
Nice. Again, after the draft, I don't know. There might be teams looking at, I know we're saying there's not a top 10 guy this year, quarterback-wise, or maybe we will when we record next week. But you've only got to think they only need to pick one or two, and a few of those teams that look like a landing spot at the moment might not. But okay, PB, where do you think Garoppolo will end up?
I honestly don't know. It's the same as Mayfield, really. It could be any of those teams like the Seahawks or the Panthers, or he might just stay, as a 1B to Trey Lance, and like I've said, I could still see him starting on week one. I don't really know. They haven't really come out and said Trey Lance is our guy, and he's I can't think of anything outstanding he did last year. He didn't have any bad plays particularly that I can think of, but he didn't come out and win this. Yeah, he didn't come out and win the starting job outright, did he? And they got to the NFC Championship game. So I could still see Garoppolo staying there, to be honest, more likely than being traded.
JB?
I think Garoppolo stays a 49er.
Wow. It says a lot about the QB market, doesn't it? You kind of wonder what the market would be for Murray if he ends up, forcing a trade. A lot of people feel, rightly or wrongly, pretty committed to their guys. The Giants, I don't know. There are so many people who just seem committed to the people under centre for at least another year. But what the next 12 months could bring, who knows?
Well, you say that on the market. I had a quick look up because I was trying to remind myself just what Rod Tidwell got at the end of Jerry Maguire. That was that life-changing contract. Anyone want to guess a number?
Wasn't it like 8 or 9 million or something like that a year?
It's 11.2 million. And when you consider that versus what we're talking about now, things have changed.
I mean, also, Tidwell, it was a fictional character. So.
Yeah, I mean, he was a Sun Devil, though. He wanted to stay in Arizona. I mean, who can blame him? Got to love
Kyler Murray by the sounds of it.
Sorry, JB, I didn't mean to cut you off talking about Cuba Gooding Jr.
No, go for it.
Yeah. Players who actually want to stay and play for the Cardinals. Who knew, eh? Who knew? Gents, it's been good to be back, hasn't it? It's been good to roll through the NFL's top stories. And this one isn't really a recent story, but certainly is one that has occurred since we recorded last. To end really with just reference to the very sad news about Dwayne Haskins. I think a guy who was certainly still a young quarterback who had opportunities potentially to play in Pittsburgh. The kind of guy that if you listen to the coaches who've talked about him both in Washington and actually in Pittsburgh with the small amount of time there, really felt that he had enormous things to offer and would have found his way to be a real contributor in the game. To lose a player like that at 24 is absolutely no age at all. And certainly everyone at this podcast sends out our condolences to what is an awful thing, obviously, for the Haskins family, his friends, and the Pittsburgh Steelers organization. But to end on that, gentlemen, I think it was great to be back. It was great to dig into all these stories. And also I enjoy some good Cardinals chat, even if it is Kyler Murray holding out for more and more and more. PB, just before we go, happy with the level of time you got to speak on this particular episode? Did it meet all contracted terms in every way?
You can speak to my agent.
I just can't wait. If it's a Debo Samuel situation, we'll have to see what your brother posts on social media this evening.
I can't wait till he goes on a different podcast and spills his beans everywhere.
well, the Buccaneers fan podcast they don't even know what they're missing, do they? Can't wait to get him back on. Gentlemen, let's pick it all up next week where we'll talk the draft and let everybody out there in listener land know which names you should be listening out for and hoping are called out and joining the ranks of your team in 7 days time?
Yeah,
a week away from the draft. So until then, gentlemen, enjoy your time and I'll look forward to catching up again very soon.
Thanks, Rob.
See you, pals.
Thanks a lot.
This is amazing.
Remember to subscribe and be cool. Tell your friends.